Welcome to the Book Talk Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Book Talk Podcast, where we explore the world's most influential books, one conversation at a time. I'm Ryan.
Hi, Ryan. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
Hi, Sophia. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. And you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Me too. I think today's book has the power to change the way people think about money and success.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of those books everyone should read at least once.
Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to Book Talk Podcast.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps us bring you more great book discussions every week.
It really means a lot to us. Thank you for being here.
All right, Sophia, are you ready?
I'm ready. So what book are we discussing today?
Today, we're discussing The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Great choice. Let's dive in and discover why this book has changed the way millions of people think about money.
Yeah, it really is a game changer.
Because, to really understand what this deep dive is all about, we kind of have to start with this story that perfectly captures just the absolute absurdity of how humans interact with wealth.
Oh, I know exactly which story you're talking about.
All right. It's just wild. So picture this. It's the early 2000s. There is this brilliant technology executive.
Like a real Silicon Valley whiz kid.
Exactly. This guy is in his 20s, and he has just designed and patented a key component for Wi-Fi routers. So he is, by all definitions, a certified genius.
He literally built the thing we all use every day.
Right. And he starts multiple companies, sells them, and he is just swimming in cash.
I mean, he is the living embodiment of the Silicon Valley dream. He mastered the hard science, the engineering part of it, and the venture capital game, too.
He did. But his behavior with that wealth, that is where the story just goes completely off the rails.
It really does.
According to the book, this executive used to carry around a stack of $100 bills that was like several inches thick.
Just in his pocket.
Just walking around with it. Just to show off, And one day, he hands a colleague several $1,000s in raw cash and tells him, go down to the jewelry store and buy a bunch of $1,000 solid gold coins.
Which, I mean, that already sounds like the setup to a really bizarre joke.
Oh, it gets so much weirder. So the colleague actually brings the gold coins back, and the executive grabs them, takes a group of his buddies down to a dock overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and get this, they start skipping these $1,000 gold coins into the water.
Like rocks.
Like rocks. Just winging solid gold into the ocean, laughing, arguing over whose coin went the furthest.
My brain can't even process that level of disconnect from reality.
I know, right? And this wasn't even like an isolated incident. Another time, he was at a hotel restaurant and he shattered a $500 lamp.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and the manager comes over, understandably upset, and asks him to pay for it. So the executive pulls out his brick of cash, peels off $5,000, shoves it at the manager, and essentially tells him to just get out of his face.
Wow. So he's just using money as a weapon at that point.
Completely.
He's weaponizing his wealth to insulate his ego from any actual consequences in the real world.
Exactly. And the punchline to this whole story. A few years later, that same brilliant tech pioneering executive went completely, utterly bankrupt.
Just wiped out.
Every single cent gone.
Yeah.
So I want everyone listening to hold that image in your mind. The gold coins sinking into the Pacific. And let's travel across the country to rural Vermont to meet a man named Ronald Reed.
Oh, the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Literally the opposite. Ronald was a janitor. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school. He fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years. And then after that, he swept floors at a local JCPenney for 17 years.
A guy who probably never even saw a $1,000 gold coin in his entire life, let alone skipped one into an ocean?
Never. He lived in a 2-bedroom house that he bought for like $12,000. He wore old flannel shirts, chopped his own firewood, and just lived this incredibly quiet, frugal life.
Just a totally ordinary, under-the-radar kind of guy.
Right. But when he died in 2014 at the age of 92, the whole world suddenly learned who Ronald Reed was. Because this humble floor sweeper died with a net worth of over $8 million.
Which is just staggering, and we should probably clarify immediately for anyone listening. He didn't invent some secret good. He a massive trust fund, and he definitely didn't win the Powerball.
None of the above. He left $2 million to his stepkids and over $6 million to his local hospital and library.
That's amazing.
And the mechanics of his wealth were painfully simple. He just saved whatever tiny fraction of his janitor's salary he could. He bought blue chip stocks, he reinvested the dividends, and he waited
Just waited.
for decades.
For decades.
Which brings us to the central burning question that this entire deep dive is built upon. How in the world does a rural janitor massively outperform a highly educated, wildly successful tech executive in the exact same field of wealth accumulation?
Such a good question, and it really exposes a fundamental flaw in how society teaches us about finance. I mean, we treat money like it's physics or, engineering.
Right, like it's just math.
Exactly. Like, if you're building a bridge, the tensile strength of the steel doesn't care about your mood. You plug the data into the formula and the bridge stands. Period.
It's objective.
Right. And we assume building wealth works the exact same way. Like, if you master the math and learn the market formulas, you get rich. But financial success is perhaps the only discipline on earth where a soft skill, how you behave, completely eclipses a hard science, what you know.
That is such an important distinction.
Right. Like, you would never see a janitor perform a triple bypass surgery better than a Harvard-trained cardiologist just because the janitor had a quote-unquote good mindset.
Right, that would be terrifying.
It would end in disaster. But in finance, Ronald Read completely destroyed the tech genius because wealth is driven by psychology and emotions and ego, not spreadsheets.
So true. And if wealth is entirely about behavior, then we really have to dissect why people behave the way they do with money.
Yeah.
Why does one person skip gold coins while another quietly buys blue chip stock? And the author introduces a concept here that completely reframes human behavior. The idea is simply this: no one is crazy.
Which, I've got to be honest, is a really tough pill to swallow when you literally just described a guy throwing gold into the ocean. I mean, that looks deeply crazy.
It looks crazy to us, Ray, observing it from the outside. But he points out this staggering mathematical reality about human perspective. Your personal experiences make up roughly 0.000000001% of what has actually happened in the history of the world.
Basically nothing?
Basically nothing. But those microscopic tiny experiences dictate about 80% of how you think the world works.
Wow.
So we are all essentially trapped inside our own highly distorted, localized lenses of reality, and we mistakenly believe our lens is the objective truth.
That makes so much sense. And the historical examples in the book are just brilliant for this. Like, take the stock market.
All right.
Let's say you're listening to this and you were born in 1950. During your teens and 20s, which, by the way, psychologists agree are the most formative, impressionable years for developing your worldview, the stock market essentially flatlined.
Right. It was just dead.
Adjusted for inflation, it went absolutely nowhere, zero growth. So your lived reality, which is deeply wired into your neurons at that point, is that the stock market is a stagnant, dangerous place where your capital just goes to die.
But then if you were born just 20 years later,
Right.
1970.
Exactly. If you were born in 1970, your formative years coincided with the roaring 80s and 90s. The S&P 500 increased almost tenfold during your teens and 20s.
That's a massive difference.
Huge. Your lived reality, literally the only thing you have ever known as a young adult, is that the stock market is this magical, unstoppable, wealth-generating machine.
So if you put the 1950 cohort and the 1970 cohort in a room today, and you ask them how to invest their retirement savings.
Now, they're going to vehemently disagree.
Right. The 1950 group wants bonds in gold, something safe. But the 1970 group wants aggressive growth stocks.
And the crazy part is, neither group is quote-unquote smarter than the other.
No, not at all.
Neither is better at math. They're just equally intelligent people applying identical logic to vastly different lived experiences.
And this creates what we can call the empathy gap in finance, because we constantly judge other people's financial decisions based on our own microscopic slice of reality.
We totally do.
But I do want to push back on this idea that no one is crazy for a second, because there's an example in the source material that I really struggle with.
That's fun.
He talks about lottery tickets. Statistically, lower-income households in America spend an average of over $400 a year on lottery tickets.
Right.
Now, $400 is like a week of groceries for a struggling family. Mathematically, the odds of winning are effectively zero. It is a guaranteed destruction of wealth. So I hear the empathy argument, but aren't we just giving a philosophical hall pass to terrible financial literacy?
Okay, yeah. That is the standard rationalist critique, right?
Because the math is terrible.
The math is horrible. If you look at it purely through the lens of a spreadsheet, Yes, it's financial self-sabotage. If
Huh?
they took that $400 and put it in an index fund, they would mathematically improve their lives over time.
Exactly.
But this is where we're forced to step out of the spreadsheet and into the psychological reality of living paycheck to paycheck.
All right, but how does living paycheck to paycheck make throwing $400 away logical? I mean, I just don't see it.
Because you are assuming they are buying a financial asset.
Well, aren't they?
No, they aren't. They are purchasing a psychological utility.
Ah.
If you are deeply impoverished, you likely have no realistic path to the things wealthy people just take for granted.
Like what?
Like paying for your kids' college, buying a home in a safe neighborhood, taking a real vacation without going into crushing debt. The structural reality of your life feels like a trap. There is no upward mobility in your immediate sightline.
Okay, I'm following you.
So, for $2 a ticket, what are they actually buying? They are buying a few days of hope.
Wow. Okay.
They are buying the temporary, tangible feeling of dreaming about a better life. Someone who already has a well-funded 401k paying $400 a year for hope sounds insane.
Right, because you don't need to buy hope. You already have a financial plan.
Exactly. But if you have no plan and no prospects, that lottery ticket is checking a profound psychological box that the spreadsheet just cannot quantify.
So it's not an investment strategy at all. It's an emotional coping mechanism disguised as a financial transaction.
Precisely.
Okay, I can understand the psychology behind it now, even if I still really despise the math.
Yeah, the math is still bad.
But it just shows how powerfully our starting lines dictate our financial logic. But that raises another question. If our starting lines are so vastly different and our decisions are heavily clouded by these emotional coping mechanisms, how can we possibly evaluate who is actually successful?
That's a great point.
Right. Like, if a hedge fund manager makes $1 billion, how much of that is his actual genius and how much is just the cosmic lottery of where he was born and what market he experienced?
Well, that brings us to two invisible forces that govern the universe: luck and risk. They are introduced here as doppelgangers.
Doppelgangers.
Yeah, they're the twin realities that every outcome in life is guided by forces outside of your individual effort. I mean, the world is simply too complex, with 8 billion people making trillions of intersecting decisions for 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes.
That makes sense. The story of Kent Evans is actually pretty haunting in this regard.
Oh, yeah. That story is wild.
Because everyone knows the mythology of Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
He is the ultimate self-made tech billionaire. But if you look at his starting line, he went to Lakeside School in Seattle in 1968.
Which is crucial.
It's everything. That was one of the only high schools in the entire world that had a teletype computer at that time.
In 1968, most colleges didn't even have that.
Exactly. The statistical improbability of a bright kid with an interest in coding landing at exactly that school at exactly that time is astronomical. That is the raw force of luck.
Absolutely. But the thing is, Lakeside didn't just have Bill Gates. It had another kid named Kent Evans.
Right.
And by all accounts, from Gates himself. Actually, Kent Evans was just as brilliant, just as driven, and just as deeply obsessed with computers as Gates was. They were peers. They were supposed to conquer this nascent computing world together.
But Ken Evans met the doppelganger.
He did.
While Gates experienced extreme luck, Ken Evans experienced extreme risk. Because before he even graduated high school, Ken Evans died in a mountaineering accident.
It's so tragic.
He fell on the wrong side of life's roulette wheel. He had the exact same skills, the exact same drive, and the exact same access as Bill Gates, but the external forces of the universe dictated a completely different tragic outcome.
Yeah.
So for every Bill Gates we celebrate on the cover of a magazine, there is a Ken Evans buried in the footnotes of history.
And that completely shatters how we consume business media, doesn't it?
It really does.
Think about, like, Forbes magazine. The cover of Forbes almost never features the deeply responsible, highly intelligent investor who did everything right, but just happened to get wiped out by a completely unpredictable macroeconomic risk.
Right, like a global pandemic destroying their supply chain out of nowhere.
Exactly. They don't get a cover story. Conversely, Forbes routinely celebrates these aggressive, reckless investors who took insane, uncalculated risks, but just happened to get lucky and land on the right side of the coin flip.
We worship the survivors. It's classic survivorship bias. We try to reverse engineer success by studying the billionaires, and we just assume every decision they made was a stroke of genius, completely ignoring the invisible wind of luck at their backs.
And the real danger for the listener here is that if you try to emulate extreme outliers, You are trying to replicate the unreplicable.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, you can emulate a strong work ethic, sure, but you absolutely cannot emulate getting born in the right decade or attending the one high school on the planet with a computer in 1968.
Which leads to a really liberating takeaway, I think.
Hmm?
You have to cultivate intense humility regarding your own success and profound forgiveness for your own
Yeah,
failures.
forgiveness is key.
Because if your portfolio tanks or your business struggles, it's not necessarily because you are foolish. The unforgiving realities of risk are always in play. It is never as good as it seems, and it is never as bad as it seems.
Very true.
But if luck and risk are entirely out of our control, what can we control? Like, if we can't guarantee success just by being smart, what is the mechanical process for actually building wealth in this chaotic world?
Well, to do that, we have to shift from analyzing external whims to mastering internal discipline. We really have to look at the sheer mathematics of time and the psychology of survival.
Okay.
And to do that, we have to talk about Warren Buffett.
I knew Buffett was coming. You can't have a finance deep dive without him.
It's the law. But look, there are probably 2,000 books out there breaking down his value investing model, right?
Oh, at least.
His analysis of corporate moats, his management style at Berkshire Hathaway. But the author strips all of that complex stuff away and points to this confounding, almost insulting truth about Buffett's wealth.
Which is?
His real secret isn't just that he is a good investor. It's that he has been a good investor since he was literally a child.
Right. Time is the heavy lifter.
Exactly. If Buffett had started investing in his 30s and retired in his 60s, like a normal person, his net worth would be a tiny fraction of what it is today. You likely would have never even heard of him.
That's wild to think about.
The vast, overwhelming majority of his tens of billions of dollars came after his 65th birthday. That is the raw, unadulterated power of compounding.
But here is the problem with compounding and why people struggle with it. The human brain did not evolve to understand it.
We really didn't.
Neurologically, we are built for linear environments. Like, if our ancestors gathered berries for one day, they got one basket. If they gathered for 2 days, they got 2 baskets.
1 + 1 is 2. Simple.
Simple addition. Our neural pathways just do not possess the hardware to intuitively map exponential curves. There's this great mathematical thought experiment in the book. If I ask you or the listener to calculate 8 + 8 + 8 9 times...
Okay, my brain handles that pretty easily. It's 72.
Right, that's linear.
Yeah.
But if I ask you to calculate 8 times 8 times 8 9 times...
Yeah, the brain just short circuits. It feels like it should be a big number, maybe, I don't know, a few thousand.
The answer is over 134 million.
See? That's just absurd.
Exponential thinking completely shatters our intuition. And because we can't intuitively feel the math of compounding, we ignore it. We get bored.
Yeah, waiting is boring.
A 10% return on a small portfolio feels like absolutely nothing for the first 10 years. It feels agonizingly slow. So instead of waiting, we chase dopamine.
We want the quick hit.
Exactly. We try to find the secret day trading strategy, or we buy into volatile crypto assets looking for that fast money. We reject the most powerful force in finance because it doesn't give us immediate neurological feedback.
So true.
The greatest book on investing ever written shouldn't be a complex manual. It should just be 1 page long and say, shut up and wait.
Shut up and wait. I love that. It's brilliant. But, it implies a massive prerequisite.
What's that?
You have to actually survive long enough to do the waiting. Which brings us to arguably the most vital distinction in the entire discussion. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are not the same thing.
Not at all.
In fact, they require entirely contradictory skill sets.
The tragedy of Jesse Livermore perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, Jesse Livermore. Man.
Yeah, Livermore was one of the most famous stock traders of the early 20th century. By age 30, leading up to the 1929 market crash, he had built a massive fortune. And while everyone else was losing their shirts in the crash, Livermore had actually shorted the market.
He bet against it.
He bet against it, and he won big. He walked away from Black Tuesday with the inflation-adjusted equivalent of $100 million. He was an absolute master at getting wealthy.
But what happened to him?
He lost every single penny. He went completely bankrupt and eventually took his own life.
It's awful.
It really is. And why did it happen? Because the psychological traits that made him a genius at getting money, his appetite for massive risk, his supreme overconfidence, his willingness to bet the house, were the exact traits that destroyed him when the market turned against him later.
Wow.
He never developed the skill of staying wealthy.
Because getting wealthy requires putting yourself out there, right? It requires optimism, hustling, and taking calculated swings.
Hmm.
But keeping wealth requires the exact opposite.
Total opposite.
It requires profound humility. It requires a baseline level of fear and paranoia that what you have built can be ripped away by a random market event at any moment.
You have to be a little scared.
Yeah. It requires you to look at your past success and admit, hey, a lot of that was luck, and I can't rely on it happening again.
It's the survival mindset. And the author argues that survival is fundamentally more important than intelligence or growth or market insight.
Nassim Taleb talks about this too, right?
Yes.
In The Black Swan.
Yes. Having an edge in the market and surviving the market are two different things, but the first absolutely requires the second. If you don't survive, your edge is useless. You must avoid financial ruin at all costs.
Let's use a venture capital metaphor to explain why survival is literally the only thing that matters. Think about how a top VC fund works. They invest in 100 startups. They fully expect 90 of those startups to completely fail, just go straight to zero.
90% failure rate.
Right. They expect maybe 9 to break even or do okay.
Mm-hmm.
But they are banking on that one remaining startup being the next Uber or Airbnb. That one massive success will pay for all 99 failures and generate a massive profit.
That is the concept of tails you win.
Exactly.
In statistics, the tail ends of a distribution curve are the extreme outlier events.
No.
And in finance, in business, even in art, a tiny minority of tail events account for the vast majority of outcomes. Most of what you try in life is going to fail or just flatline.
And that's okay.
It is perfectly fine as long as you survive the failures so that you are still in the game when that rare massive tail event occurs. George Soros said it beautifully. He said, it's not about whether you are right or wrong. It's about how much money you make when you're right and how much you avoid losing when you're wrong.
That's a great quote.
You can be wrong 50% of the time and still make a fortune.
It's kind of like mapping out a cross-country road trip. Technically, mathematically, driving 150 miles per hour will optimize your travel time.
Sure, on paper.
On a spreadsheet, it is the most efficient speed. But the real-world risk of a fatal crash at 150 miles per hour completely negates the math.
Hey.
If you crash, your travel time becomes infinite. You don't reach the destination.
Right.
Optimization means absolutely nothing if it introduces the risk of ruin. Survival has to be the baseline.
So, if Ken Evans teaches us that risk can take you out completely regardless of your skill, and Jesse Livermore teaches us that reckless optimization leads to ruin, then the only logical objective isn't maximizing returns.
Right.
It's just not dying.
You just don't die.
Pretty good life advice in general. But let's assume we heed this advice. We embrace humility, we avoid ruin, we let our money compound over decades, and we build this substantial wealth. This leads to what I think is the most philosophical question in the deep dive.
Which is,
What is the actual point? Why are we enduring market crashes and agonizing boredom to hoard this resource? What is the highest dividend that money actually pays?
man, that's the big one. And to answer that, we have to look at a landmark 1981 study by a psychologist named Angus Campbell.
Oh, this study is fascinating.
It really is. Campbell wanted to know what actually makes Americans happy. So he looked at all the traditional metrics we associate with joy and success. He looked at salary size, square footage of their houses, the prestige of their job titles, their geographic location.
Basically, all the exact things society tells us we need to chase.
Exactly, the whole American dream checklist.
Yeah.
But when he crunched the data, none of those things were the primary drivers of well-being. A high salary didn't reliably predict happiness.
Which is so counter to what we're taught.
Right. But the single most powerful common denominator of happiness, the thing that overrode everything else, was having a strong sense of control over one's life. Yes, the greatest intrinsic value of money, the highest dividend it pays, is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today.
That's powerful.
It's the power to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. Money isn't a tool for buying material goods. It is a tool for buying back your time from a world that wants to dictate your schedule.
And biologically, this makes total sense. If you look at stress studies, humans who have high demands placed on them, but low control over how they execute those demands, like an assembly line worker or a micromanaged junior employee, they have chronically elevated cortisol levels.
It's physically unhealthy.
Lack of autonomy literally poisons us. The story of Derek Sivers illustrates the mechanics of buying autonomy beautifully.
I love this Sivers story.
Because Sivers wasn't a millionaire. He was just a young guy working a day job, earning about $20,000 a year. But he was relentless about his expenses. He kept his cost of living at a microscopic $1,000 a month.
He created a massive gap between what he earned and what he spent, even on a pretty low income.
Right. And over 2 years, he managed to save $12,000. Now, in the grand scheme of finance, 12 grand doesn't sound like a fortune. But at his specific burn rate, that 12 grand bought him an entire year of total, unadulterated freedom.
The whole year.
He quit his job at 22, walked away from the rat race, and became a full-time musician. True wealth, in Sivers' framework, isn't about the raw dollar amount in the bank. It's about unspent assets, acting as a shield against external control.
But this brings us to a massive psychological trap. The man in the car paradox.
I fall for this one sometimes.
We all do. If we know that freedom and autonomy are the ultimate evolutionary goals, why do so many people blow their wealth on $200,000 Ferraris, massive mansions, and luxury watches?
Well, because humans are deeply, fundamentally social primates. We are wired to care about social hierarchy and status. We conflate the possession of wealth with the signaling of wealth. We buy things because we want respect and admiration from the tribe.
Yep, we want to look successful.
But the man in the car paradox exposes the total tragedy of this behavior. When you are walking down the street and you see someone pull up to a red light in a screaming fast, custom-painted Ferrari, what goes through your mind? You don't look at the driver and think, wow, that specific human being is so cool and successful, and I deeply respect his intellect.
No, you completely ignore the driver.
Yeah.
You look at the car and you project yourself into the driver's seat. You think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I was cool.
Exactly. The driver bought the car to be admired. But the pedestrians aren't admiring him. They are using his car as a prop to daydream about their own hypothetical status.
It's so ironic.
The wealthy driver thinks he is buying respect, but he is actually just buying a mirror that reflects other people's desires back at them. It's a completely unwinnable game of ego.
Which leads to what might be the most counterintuitive definition in the whole discussion. Wealth is what you don't see.
This is such a critical concept, and honestly, it's why so many people fail at finance. We judge wealth by what we can visually process. The Instagram vacations, the designer clothes, the luxury cars.
Because we literally cannot see people's bank accounts or their brokerage statements.
Right. So our mental model of being wealthy is entirely constructed around the act of spending money. But spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest, most efficient way to have less money.
The Rihanna lawsuit is mentioned here, which sounds like a joke, but it is a perfect distillation of this blind spot.
Oh my gosh, yes. Remind me what happened there.
So Rihanna, one of the most successful pop stars on the planet, nearly went bankrupt at one point. And she sued her financial advisor, claiming gross mismanagement. And the advisor's defense in court was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money?
I mean, it's hilarious, but it exposes a deep cognitive flaw in all of us. When the average person says, I want to be a millionaire, what they almost always mean is, I want to spend $1 million.
Which is the literal mathematical opposite of being a millionaire.
Exactly. Wealth isn't the Ferrari. Wealth is the Ferrari not purchased. Wealth is the first-class upgrade declined. Wealth is the diamond watch left in the display case. It is the financial assets that have not yet been converted into visible, depreciating stuff.
But because wealth is invisible, it is incredibly hard to learn by imitation. We learn how to talk, dress, and act by mimicking others. But how do you mimic the restraint of a wealthy person when their defining characteristic is what they are not doing?
That's a great point.
Like Ronald Reed, our janitor from the beginning. He was nobody's financial role model while he was alive because his $8 million was entirely invisible. His wealth was hidden in account balances.
Which is why tying your ego to visible consumption is so profoundly dangerous. If you play the status game, you get trapped in the never enough principle. There's the story of Rajat Gupta that highlights this perfectly.
Ah, the McKinsey CEO.
Yes. Rajat Gupta was the CEO of McKinsey. He sat on the board of Goldman Sachs. He was universally respected, deeply connected, and had a net worth of roughly $100 million. By any metric, he had won the game of capitalism.
$100 million generates enough passive income to fund a dynasty of luxury for generations. You literally never have to work again.
But Gupta wasn't a billionaire. He was a centimillionaire swimming in a social circle of billionaires. His 100 million felt inadequate to him.
Unbelievable.
So, to bridge that gap and elevate his status, he engaged in illegal insider trading. He got caught, his reputation was incinerated, and he went to federal prison. He destroyed the ultimate dividends of wealth, his freedom, and his peace of mind because he literally did not know when to stop.
It's the hedonic treadmill applied to net worth.
That's
If
right.
your expectations rise equally with your results, the goalpost never stops moving. You take one step forward, and the goalpost of your desires moves 2 steps away.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
You constantly feel like you are falling behind your peers, which pushes you to take greater and greater risks, eventually leading to ruin.
You have to explicitly define what enough is for you. Because no matter the potential financial gain, there are certain things that are invaluable and never worth risking. Your reputation is invaluable. Your freedom is invaluable. Your family and friends are invaluable.
Your ability to sleep well at night without churning anxiety is invaluable.
Absolutely. And the only way to protect those things is to halt the moving goalpost and refuse to play the ego-driven status game.
So if we synthesize this, if true wealth is unspent assets acting as a shield, and the ultimate goal is autonomy rather than status, the obvious mechanical step is that we must aggressively save our money.
Right. Save, save, save.
But here is the paradox. How do we meticulously plan our savings for a future that is, by definition, completely unpredictable?
That is the million-dollar question, and it brings us to managing error, change, and ego. The first piece of advice here completely flies in the face of traditional financial planning.
What is it?
Traditional planners tell you to set specific goals. Save for the down payment on the house. Save for the kids' college fund. Save for the new car. But the argument here is save for absolutely no reason at all.
Which sounds absurd to someone who likes neat, categorized spreadsheets.
It sounds absurd until you realize that goal-oriented saving only makes sense in a perfectly predictable world. And our world is governed by chaos.
Yeah, the universe doesn't care about your spreadsheet.
Exactly. If you only save for the risks you can predict, like a broken boiler or a car repair, you have absolutely no margin of safety for the bizarre, unprecedented shocks that life actually throws at you. A pandemic, a sudden medical crisis, a massive industry disruption that wipes out your career.
You can't put a label on an emergency fund for an emergency you can't even imagine.
Right. You should save just to save. It is a general hedge against life's inevitable ability to surprise the hell out of you.
And saving, fundamentally, ties right back into the ego. There is this definition of savings that I think is the best I have ever heard. Savings is simply the gap between your ego and your income.
That is profound.
It really is. Past a certain basic level of income required for survival and comfort, everything else you spend is just ego approaching income. It's spending money to signal to the tribe that you have money.
Wow.
If you can cultivate humility, if you genuinely stop caring what other people think of your car or your clothes, your desire to spend plummets. Your savings rate skyrockets, and your savings rate is entirely in your control, whereas market returns are entirely out of your control.
But even with a high savings rate, you need a strategy to handle the unpredictability of the world. You need what engineers call a margin of safety or room for error. There's a brilliant analogy here involving blackjack card counters.
The card counters are fascinating because they're operating in a mathematically rigid system, but they
Yeah.
still have to account for chaos.
Exactly. Card counters in a casino are not psychic. They don't know exactly what card the dealer is going to pull next.
No.
They use systems like assigning high and low values to cards to track the deck and calculate the probabilities of certain cards remaining. When the deck is rich in tens and face cards, the mathematical odds shift slightly in the player's favor.
But they operate on a razor-thin statistical edge.
Very thin. But here is the key. Even when the math is in their favor, they know they can still be wrong. A bad run of cards can still ruin a statistically perfect hand. Because they know the future is unknowable, they don't bet all their money on one hand.
They hold back.
They use formulas like the Kelly criterion to size their bets. They leave a massive room for error, so that if the probability doesn't work out this time, they have enough chips left to survive and play the next hand.
They mathematically plan for their plan to fail.
Yes.
But normal people are notoriously terrible at leaving room for error in their own lives. We are infected with overconfidence. There's a study referenced by Harvard psychologist Max Bazerman on home renovations.
Oh, I know how this goes.
When people look at a friend's renovation plan, they logically assume the project will go 25 to 50% over budget and take twice as long. We can clearly see the potential for chaos in other people's lives.
But when we look at our own renovation project,
We naively assume it will be finished exactly on time, perfectly on budget, with zero complications.
which literally never happens.
Never. We deny the need for a margin of safety in our own lives because our ego convinces us that we are in total control. But the most important part of any financial plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. You need cash reserves, you need diversification, you need a buffer for when you are inevitably wrong.
So, how to reconcile this need for a buffer with the constant advice to optimize our investments? The financial industry tells us to be cold, calculating, and purely rational. Maximize every decimal point of return.
This is where we need to make a vital distinction. Aiming to be mostly reasonable works vastly better than trying to be coldly rational.
Okay, explain that.
Well, humans are not spreadsheets. We are emotional, hormonal creatures subject to panic and regret.
Very true. And the story of Harry Markowitz is the ultimate proof of this. Markowitz is a titan of finance. He literally won the Nobel Prize in economics for inventing modern portfolio theory.
Which is a huge deal.
It's massive. For those unfamiliar, MPT is the mathematical framework proving you can maximize returns while minimizing risk by combining non-correlated assets. It is the bedrock of rational mathematical investing. But when Markowitz was asked how he invested his own retirement money in the 1950s, he admitted he didn't use his own mathematically perfect Nobel-winning formulas.
Wait, the guy who invented the math refused to use it on his own money.
Yes. He said he visualized the grief he would feel if the stock market went way up and he missed out, versus the agony he would feel if the market crashed and he lost everything.
He was optimizing for his feelings.
Exactly. So instead of using his complex algorithms, he just split his money 50-50 between stocks and bonds. A completely basic heuristic. Why? Because his main goal was to minimize his future regret. He wanted a portfolio that allowed him to sleep well at night.
He prioritized biological and psychological comfort over mathematical optimization. And that's exactly the point. A coldly rational, highly leveraged strategy might yield the highest returns on paper. But if it causes you so much cortisol-spiking anxiety that you panic and sell everything at the bottom of a market dip, it is a terrible strategy for you.
Absolutely.
A reasonable strategy that you can stick with for 30 years will always massively outperform a rational strategy that you abandon after a week of volatility.
And speaking of abandoning strategies, we also have to account for the fact that we are not static entities. The listener tuning into this deep dive right now is not the exact same person they were 10 years ago, and they will not be the same person 10 years from now.
Which seems obvious, but we constantly forget it.
Psychologists call this the end of history illusion.
This is based on the research by psychologist Dan Gilbert, right?
Hmm.
The idea that we are terrible at prospection, like simulating our future emotional states.
Exactly. The end of history illusion is the human tendency to be keenly aware of how much we have changed in the past, but to radically underestimate how much our personalities, desires, and goals will change in the future.
Oh, yeah.
We look backward and think, wow, I was so foolish at 18, I've grown so much. But we look at our present self and think, I have finally arrived at the finished version of me. My current desires are permanent.
Which is statistically false.
Yeah.
I mean, every 5-year-old boy wants to drive a tractor when they grow up. But you don't see 40-year-old lawyers crying in their offices because they aren't driving tractors.
That would be a very strange law firm.
Right. They evolved, their desires shifted.
Yeah.
Yet as adults, we make these incredibly rigid 30-year financial plans, like taking on massive mortgages or locking ourselves into hyper-specialized careers, assuming our 50-year-old selves will want the exact same lifestyle our 30-year-old selves want.
Think about the spreadsheet you probably have on your laptop right now, mapping out your retirement. You are essentially planning a life for a complete stranger.
That's a terrifying way to look at it, but it's true.
This is why extreme financial planning is so incredibly dangerous. If you commit to an extreme path like extreme austerity, saving every penny, never traveling, never enjoying a dinner out, all for a distant retirement, or on the flip side, extreme workaholism, grinding 100 hours a week to buy luxury goods while ignoring your family,
You are setting yourself up for failure.
you are radically increasing the odds of immense future regret when your values inevitably change.
You have to maintain flexibility to allow for that personal evolution. And when you do realize your goals have changed, you have to be ruthless about moving on. Daniel Kahneman talks about how sunk costs are the devil.
Sunk costs anchor your present decisions to past efforts or money that can never be refunded. If you stay in a miserable, soul-crushing career just because you spent 4 years and $100,000 getting a degree in it, you are letting a stranger, your 18-year-old self who chose that major, dictate the rest of your life.
You have to be willing to abandon those past plans without mercy to protect your present autonomy.
Okay, so we've covered a massive amount of internal psychology. We've talked about taming the ego, acknowledging the illusion of control, maintaining a margin of safety, and accepting that our desires will change.
That's a lot of internal work.
It is, but even if you master all of those internal traps, you still have to take your hard-earned money and throw it into a chaotic, terrifying machine, the global stock market.
Yeah.
How do you maintain that internal zen when the external world is crashing and the market is flashing red?
The first and most critical step is fundamentally changing how you define market volatility. There's a Disneyland analogy here that is just the absolute best cognitive reframe I've ever
Oh,
heard.
I love this one. Walk us through it.
So when you go to Disneyland with your family, you pay an admission fee at the gate. Let's say it's $100 a ticket. When you hand over that $100, you do not view it as a fine for doing something wrong. You view it as the required price of admission to experience the magic, the rides, and the entertainment.
You don't feel penalized. You feel like you made a normal transaction.
Right. But when people invest in the stock market and their portfolio drops by 15 or 20% during a volatile year, which, by the way, historically happens quite frequently, they view that drop as a fine.
Like they've been given a speeding ticket.
Exactly. They feel a spike of cortisol, they feel like they made a terrible mistake, and they feel like they're being actively punished by the financial gods.
But the historical reality is that market volatility, the stomach-churning uncertainty, the sudden dips, that is not a fine. That is the admission fee you pay for the long-term magic of compounding returns.
Nothing in life is free.
Nothing. If you want to capture the historic average annual returns of the stock market to build generational wealth, the absolute required price you pay is periodic anxiety and temporary drops in portfolio value.
It's all about how you frame the cost. If you view the drop as a fee, you endure it. You say, this is the price of the ticket, I'm staying on the ride.
Right.
But if you view it as a fine, you assume you've done something illegal or wrong. You panic, you sell all your stocks at the exact bottom of the market, and you essentially kick yourself out of the theme park right before the best rides open up.
That perspective shift is crucial for survival. But even if you accept the admission fee, you still have to navigate the madness of market bubbles and manic panics. How do entire populations lose their minds simultaneously?
It happens over and over again.
There's a profound explanation for why bubbles form, like the dot-com crash of the late 90s that ultimately erased over $6 trillion of household wealth.
We usually just write off bubbles by saying, oh, people got greedy or the market was irrational. But the argument here is that bubbles don't form out of pure irrationality. They form because reasonable investors start taking their financial cues from people who are playing a completely different game than they are.
It's a mismatch of time horizons. Think about the mechanics of the dot-com bubble. You had day traders whose entire game was momentum. They didn't care if Pets.com had actual revenue or a viable business model.
You didn't care at all.
Their time horizon was 3 hours. They just needed to buy the stock at 10 a.m. and sell it to a greater fool at 1 p.m. for a quick profit.
For a day trader playing the momentum game, buying an overvalued garbage tech stock makes perfect logical sense for their specific game.
Exactly. But then you have a 45-year-old passive investor who is saving for a retirement that is 20 years away. Their game requires slow, steady growth based on the fundamental long-term health of the underlying businesses.
A total different sport.
Yes. When that 45-year-old watches the day trader making massive daily returns, they experience intense FOMO fear of missing out. They abandon their 20-year strategy, adopt the 3-hour strategy of the day trader, and buy into the bubble at the absolute peak.
They were a marathon runner trying to match the explosive pace of an Olympic sprinter in the middle of the race. It guarantees a physiological collapse.
The defense against this is incredibly simple, but very hard to execute. You must write down your specific mission statement. You have to know exactly what game you are playing, what your time horizon is, and you must explicitly, ruthlessly ignore the actions of everyone playing a different game.
But knowing your game is only half the battle, because the financial media ecosystem is constantly screaming at you. And it is incredibly hard to ignore the noise, especially the negative noise.
Oh, the negativity is so loud.
There is this fascinating quirk of human nature pointed out here. Optimism always sounds like a slick sales pitch, but pessimism sounds like profound intellectual advice from someone trying to save your life.
The seduction of pessimism is so real. If a pundit goes on television and says, the economy is going to grow steadily at 3% for the next 5 years, we ignore him. We think he's a naive cheerleader.
Yeah, we just tune it out.
But if a pundit goes on television, adjusts his glasses, and says, the entire debt market is going to collapse in 6 months and hyperinflation will wipe out your savings, we immediately lean in, take notes, and treat him like a prophet.
And this isn't just a media phenomenon. It is deeply rooted in our evolutionary biology. Daniel Kahneman's work on loss aversion explains this perfectly. Organisms that treat threats as vastly more urgent than opportunities have a much better chance of surviving and passing on their genes.
In the ancestral environment on the savannah, if you heard a rustle in the bushes and assumed it was a tiger, you ran away. If you were wrong and it was just the wind, you missed out on exploring that bush. No big deal.
You live to see another day.
But if you heard the rustle, assumed it was just the wind optimism, and you were wrong, you got eaten by the tiger. Your genes were removed from the gene pool. We are biologically wired to pay more attention to the doomsday prophet than the steady optimist because, for hundreds of thousands of years, ignoring threats meant death.
But in modern finance, that ancient biological instinct makes us prone to catastrophic panic. It makes us susceptible to highly complex, entirely inaccurate doomsday forecasts. And when the financial stakes are high and our sense of control is low, we become incredibly vulnerable to appealing fictions.
The story of Ali Hajaji from Yemen is gut-wrenching, but it is the perfect extreme illustration of this psychological vulnerability. A journalist was interviewing Hajaji because his young son was terribly sick with a severe intestinal virus. The local village elders told Hajaji to take a burning hot stick and shove the tip of it through his son's chest to drain the sickness. And Hajaji did it.
It's horrifying to even think about.
It is. But you have to understand the psychology. Hajaji wasn't a malicious monster. He wasn't trying to torture his child. He was completely desperate. He had no access to modern medicine, he had no money, and he was watching his child slip away. He told the reporter, when you have no money and your son is sick, you'll believe anything.
When the stakes are massive, like life or death, or losing your entire life savings, and your actual control over the situation is virtually zero, the human brain cannot handle the psychological terror of powerlessness.
It just breaks down.
So the brain will eagerly latch onto any story, any narrative, or any action that promises a solution, no matter how profoundly irrational it is.
And we do the exact same thing with our money, just in a more sanitized way. The global economy is a massive, incredibly complex, chaotic, unpredictable system. Our individual control over macroeconomics is exactly zero, but our stakes are our entire life savings.
High stakes, zero control.
So instead of accepting the terrifying reality that the market is messy and unpredictable, we desperately want to believe that someone, somewhere, has a crystal ball. We pay exorbitant fees to hedge fund gurus promising guaranteed returns. We fall for complex economic forecasts and intricate trading algorithms because the illusion of control is deeply comforting. We want to believe the burning stick will cure the illness.
Which brings us to a fascinating confession from the author himself. After writing this entire brilliant deep dive breaking down the nuances, math, and psychology of finance, Morgan Housel reveals a major decision about how he manages his own money.
And it completely contradicts traditional advice.
It does. He paid off the mortgage on his house completely, even though the interest rates on his mortgage were incredibly low.
Let's actually do the math on why this is considered a terrible decision by rational standards. Let's say he had a $500,000 mortgage at a 3% interest rate. If he took $500,000 in cash and paid off the house, he saves that 3% interest. But if he took that same cash and invested it in an S&P 500 index fund, history suggests he would earn an average of 8% to 10% a year.
The opportunity cost of paying off the mortgage is massive. He is mathematically forfeiting a huge spread of compounding returns.
Yeah.
Any strict, rational financial advisor running a spreadsheet would yell at him for destroying potential wealth.
But psychologically, it was the absolute best decision he could possibly make because owning his home free and clear, without a bank having any claim to it, gave him an unshakable sense of independence. It lowered his baseline cortisol.
It goes back to autonomy.
Yes. The return on investment for sleeping well at night is infinite. It cannot be quantified on a spreadsheet. He wasn't playing the game of maximizing every single decimal point of compound interest. He was playing the game of maximizing his family's autonomy, peace of mind, and psychological comfort.
He applied Harry Markovitz's lesson to his own life. Be reasonable, not coldly rational.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for the listener? Let's bring this massive exploration of human behavior all together.
The overarching synthesis here is that the world of finance is not a math test. It is not physics. It is a deeply emotional, psychological arena. True financial mastery isn't about finding the perfect algorithm, memorizing PE ratios, or outsmarting the stock market. It's about outsmarting your own ego.
It's about cultivating profound humility when you experience success, recognizing the invisible tailwind of luck. It's about having deep compassion for yourself and others when you fail, recognizing the unforgiving reality of risk.
Well said.
It's about realizing that the ultimate purpose of accumulating wealth isn't to buy depreciating assets to impress pedestrians at a stoplight. It is about hoarding unspent assets to build a fortress around your autonomy, buying back your own time, and giving yourself the ultimate freedom to dictate the terms of your own life.
It's about leaving a massive room for error in your plans, accepting the reality that your desires will change over time, and meticulously defining what game you are playing so you can tune out the chaotic noise of everyone else playing a different game.
And most importantly, it's about structuring your finances in a way that is reasonable for you, a way that aligns with your biology and your comfort level, so that you can endure the inevitable volatility of the market and let time do the heavy, miraculous lifting of compounding.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for everyone listening today. We talked extensively about the man in the car paradox. The next time you are sitting at a stoplight or you're scrolling through social media and you see someone driving a $200,000 sports car or posting photos from a outrageously lavish, curated vacation, I want you to actively look past the visible price tag.
Look deeply at the negative space. Look at what is invisible.
Exactly. Ask yourself what unseen anxieties, what grueling 100-hour work weeks away from their family, or what crushing hidden debt might that purchase be masking? Because wealth is what you don't see.
It's the unspent money.
And deeply consider, when you strip away the social signaling, whether you would actually be willing to trade your quiet peace of mind, your flexibility, and your absolute control over your own Tuesday mornings for their shiny, highly visible, but potentially fragile lifestyle.
Because once you fully internalize that money is just a tool to buy independence, the allure of the visible status symbols completely fades away. You stop wanting the Ferrari and you start wanting the freedom.
That is the true psychology of money.
What an incredible discussion. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the psychology of money. We urge you to take some time today to redefine your personal game, figure out exactly what enough means to you, and start maximizing for what truly helps you sleep at night.
If you found value in today's conversation, please make sure to like this episode and subscribe to Book Talk Podcast so you never miss a discussion.
And we'd love to hear from you. Share this episode with someone who might need a new perspective on wealth, leave a comment below about your biggest takeaway from Morgan Housel's book, and let us know which book you think we should feature next.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time on Book Talk Podcast.